It's time for another episode of the Sci-Fi Podcast. I still need an intro of some kind. I still need music. I know I should put more of a production value into it. Maybe we'll just do 2001: A Space Odyssey. How about that intro? Ba, 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 fum, fum. Bum, 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 bum. Which was very effective in that movie. Which he used all classical music when he was making the movie. And I know I did an episode about 2001 already, but I'm flying off the seat of my pants here. And it's just occurring to me that he built that movie over all the classical music that he laid down to it. And I think I've spoken about this before, but it's, music is very powerful, and some music works and some music does not work. I think I remember I was talking about how you couldn't achieve the same kind of effect with 2001 with non-classical music that you could with classical music. If the opening was country music, it wouldn't work. And it's no slam against country music. I don't think it would line up with what we're trying to say with 2001. But it would create something different. Country music, 60s music. You see the giant monolith, and then you hear, "These boots were made for walking. That's just what they do. One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you." And the monolith is just kind of standing there. The monolith is one of my favorite characters in science fiction. I know I'm reiterating this, but I keep coming back to the monolith. The monolith is so suave. It just stands there and looks mysterious. I want to see a sketch where these women are at a bar and the monolith is at the bar, and one woman is like, "What do you think his story is?" I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I'm getting red flags. I'm warning you, I'm getting red flags. He's hot. I don't even think it's a he. I think it's a giant slab of something. I'm gonna talk to him. And that was the night Sheila got turned into a giant floating embryo in space. That's what happened. That's because you got to use protection when you're dealing with the monolith. This is basic facts, people. Basic facts. All right, so Sci-Fi Podcast, science fiction news. What's going on in the world of science fiction? I think we're all still reacting to Star Wars. There's a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about it. A lot of positive feelings, a lot of negative feelings. Discussion has been provoked. I find it weird that all I'm reading about in the news is screenwriters and actors and directors from the movie re-explaining the movie and saying, well, this is why we decided to do that, and this is why we decided to do this. And I think there's too much talk about that. I think we're talking about this too much. The movie's the movie. That's all it is. We should just watch it and we should move on. But then, you know what? I'll tell you what's going on. I think we're all so miserable that we'd rather talk about the movie. Like, it's the way guys talk about sports. And they go on and on and on about, what are the Broncos thinking? Da-da-da-da-da-da. Why is he doing that with his defense? I mean, why is he doing that with his defense? Why would he do that? You know why? I'll tell you why. Because I'm lonely. That's the root of all of this. It totally is. If I had just finished having coitus with a Brazilian supermodel, and then I watched Star Wars, I think halfway through I'd go, why am I watching this? There's a Brazilian supermodel right here. The force is with me right here. There's plenty of force right here. I don't need extra force on the screen. Plenty of force with me right here. We saw the movie. Stop talking about it. Although, that negates what I'm doing, which is a podcast where I talk about science fiction. I think inevitably everyone has if I were doing Star Wars, this is what I would do. I'm one of those people. I have those ideas. And then I think about how much thought and energy I put into that idea. And I thought, if I had put that into my own idea or into talking to people, I might be happier. Well, this got dark really fast. I think that's enough sci-fi news. I don't think there's anything much else going on. I did watch all of Star Trek Discovery. We could talk about that too. Season 2, I watched all of it, and it's still weird to me that the show is not centered around the captain. It's centered around someone who's not the captain. When are they going to make her the captain? Michael Burnham. What does she need to do to just be the captain of Discovery? How many times does she have to save the galaxy? They're sitting there at the end of the season 2, and they're going, well, the ship needs a captain. And Saru says, well, we'll decide on the captaincy later. What's to decide? How about the woman flying through space, trying to repair all of space and time, that you're following through the wormhole? I think we know who the captain is. Make her the captain already, for goodness sake. Well, we're not sure who the captain is. No, but she has a history of insubordination. Well, blah, blah, blah. How many times do you have to save the galaxy before they give you the command of a ship? And it's not even the Enterprise. It's Discovery, which is a lot flatter than the Enterprise. It's a very flat-looking ship. It's flat and triangular. I didn't know I had that much emotion about that. But I think it's a solid argument. Also, by the way, how can one person be at the center of all of these crises? Michael Burnham. Make her the captain already, for goodness sake. If I have to go through one more season where she's not the captain by now, it's odd. I find it odd that the lead is not a captain. I'm trying to get over that. How about a Star Trek series where the lead is an ensign and not even on the bridge? The whole of the series, they're just in their crew quarters going, I can't believe it. Why is everything shaking? Why is everything shaking? I should not have joined. I should have been a merchant marine. Okay, so we covered Star Wars, we covered Star Trek. That's what's going on in the news. What are we going to talk about? What's the big centerpiece of today's show? The big classic sci-fi that we're discussing. Well, Starship Troopers, and Starship Troopers the book, not Starship Troopers the movie. Although the more I learn about both of them, the more I find the entire thing, book and the movie, it's odd. It's fascinating to me actually because the book and the movie have become, in a way, something greater than the sum of their parts. Because, well, I'm debating. Should I talk? You know what? I'm going to go through the book first, then I'll talk about the movie. And when I say I'm going to go through the book first, what I mean is I'm going to go through the Wikipedia and my thoughts on the Wikipedia. We're going to summarize what happens for those of you who might have something better to do than read the book. Well-written book. I mean, the guy, there's a reason why Robert Heinlein... Is it Heinlein? I'm afraid I'm not saying his name right. Is it Heinlein or is it Heinlein? Could it be Heinlein? I'd rather it be Heinlein. And I'd rather it be specifically pronounced Heinlein! Yes, have you read Starship Troopers written by Robert Heinlein? It does sound Yiddish. It's like I've said this in past podcasts. I will say it again. It sounds like the Yiddish word for a bodily organ. Ei, Gewalt, my Heinlein's bothering me again. It sounds like something Jerry Lewis would say when he's startled. Heinlein, pretty lady, Heinlein, nine Heinleiven. Okay. Starship Troopers. Here we go. The novel opens with Johnny Rico aboard the Corvette transport Roger Young, named after Medal of Honor recipient Roger Wilton Young, serving with the platoon known as Rashak's Roughnecks. Okay, so I've discussed this before on stage. I'm going to discuss it again. Here's my rule with spaceships. We need to stop naming spaceships after people who died. Roger Young gave his life to destroy an enemy gun turret. I don't want to be on that ship. I want to be on the ship named after the person who survived. That's what I want to be. Yes, that's what I want. I want to be on the I want to be on the Starship George Burns. That guy lived to be 101, had a great career. That's the ship I want to be on, the George Burns. Are we exploring strange new worlds and seeking new life and new civilizations? No, we're letting the other idiots do that, and they get killed. Then, once those new worlds become older, more established worlds and civilized, we will go there and we'll play the palace. That's the ship I want to be on. Roger Young, though, as a name, it's a good name. It's a strong name. They will never name a ship after me. Joshua Snyder? I don't think so. Even if I was as heroic as Roger Young and I blew up a gun turret, they're gonna be like, wow, Joshua Snyder really sacrificed himself. Should we name our ship the Joshua Snyder? Why do we name our ship the Roger Young? Because he pretty much did what Roger Young did. Yeah, I like that better. Okay, good. We're just going to call it the Roger Young. Okay. So the platoon. So Rico's on board the ship. He's on a platoon. In a platoon. The platoon carries out a raid against a planetary colony held by skinnies. So in the book, these are aliens. And I think they're called skinnies because they're these skinny-looking aliens. I would submit to you that the whole book would be more fun if they were actually not aliens, they were just like militant vegans. And they were called the skinnies. I think I'd get behind fighting that way. An entire planet of people going, I really have objections to what you're putting in your mouth right now. I really do. Have you seen this YouTube video? That's an entire planet of people going, have you seen that? You just watched the YouTube video about what happens to the animals. You should totally watch it. That said, I recognize when I'm making fun of vegans, I hope we all know that what I'm really making fun of is myself for not being open-minded and spiritual enough to see what they are seeing. And because I feel guilty for eating all of the animals and for all the death. I just want to make sure that's clear, okay? At the end of the day, I can make fun of vegans all I want, but deep, deep down, it's from a place of envy. But back to the narrative at hand. The raid is relatively brief. The platoon lands on the planet, destroys its targets, and retreats, suffering 2 casualties in the process. So it's pretty much Desert Storm, I think. That's exactly what this is. Now, in the book, I think one of the most compelling things about the book is how detailed Robert Heinlein is in describing the weaponry and the technology, and the idea that these soldiers are wearing these suits that give them enhanced strength and speed. They can jump over buildings, etc. And I feel like if I put on one of those suits, I would have enhanced strength and speed, but that would just make me like a normal person. I could, suddenly lift a water cooler at work. That would be it. Or they'd have to really, really, really supercharge my suit. All right, one of the 2 casualties was Dizzy Flores, who dies while returning to orbit. Now, why I wanted to bring this up was, I don't know the person who wrote the Wikipedia article personally, but I will say that the character of Dizzy Flores in the movie was played by a woman, and we saw her boobs. And I feel like that's exactly why this detail was put into the Wikipedia. Because that's immediately where my brain goes. Saw boobs in movie. which is a horrible thing because that actress was a good actress and has had really a body of work. I did not mean that as a pun. That's all I can think of. I'm sitting here trying to have a serious discussion about science fiction, and where do I go to? Boobs! That was the one with the boobs. The one with boobs died. I can't stand myself. This should be a self-loathing podcast. All right, so all this happens. They have a skirmish. 2 people die. One of them may or may not have had boobs. The narrative then flashes back to Rico's graduation from high school. So now, because it's one thing I like to read after guys in armored suits fighting vegans, we're going back to high school. Now here's my question. Here is my question. The character in this book goes through a lot of combat, almost dies, watches co-workers and comrades die. Also goes to a public high school. Which one do you think is worse for the psyche? I think it's a toss-up. I'm going to say it's a toss-up. Rico and his best friend Carl are considering joining the federal service after graduation. Rico is hesitant, partly due to his father's attitude towards the military. So, this right here leads to the crux of the philosophy of this book. I mean, Robert Heinlein, when he's writing this book, is trying to paint a picture of a futuristic society in which military service, only people who have served in the military are allowed to vote. And I still really don't know, because I read the Wikipedia article on Heinlein, and I still question, I wonder whether or not how much of this is what he actually believes in, or how much of this is an imagined future, and it's a postulation. And at the end of the day, I may never know for sure. All I can say is that this is painting a kind of, how do I describe it? I mean, before I read the book, people were saying, well, basically it's fascism. What Robert Heinlein is what he's describing, the world that he's describing is a fascist world. And I was like, well, I'm wondering if people just are overreacting. Let me read the book myself and see if, in fact, it is fascism. And I read that, and then I looked up the definition of fascism, and I got to say, yeah, there's a lot of fascism there. It's a little heavy on the fascism, but it's odd because it's Heinlein also very often was a big advocate for racial equality, an advocate somewhat for gender equality. The main character of this book is interesting, but the way that he switches it, you think it's Hispanic, that he's someone from Buenos Aires, but at the end you find out that actually the main character is Filipino. And to have a Filipino main character when Heinlein wrote this book, I think back in the late 40s or 50s, speaks a lot to forward thinkingness of racial equality. So we have that, and yet at the same time, he is building this futuristic fascist society in which the military service is prized. Not to say that ours is not prized, but that the military, I think, takes much more of an active leadership role. That only people who have fought in the military can lead the country. So I think the way that I have reconciled this, which in a way is hilarious, is that Robert Heinlein has created it's basically a benevolent fascist society. It's fascism with a dash of Gene Roddenberry. It would be like if a bunch of hippies were suddenly given the Nazi Party. And they're like, okay, well, obviously we're going to take away the hatred. But at the same time, I mean, the trains are running on time. So it's this weird kind of kinder, gentler fascism. Utopian fascism. Where was I in the narrative? Oh, does it matter? Because the book a lot of times, like when he's in high school and his high school teacher is talking about moral philosophy, the narrative stops and we get, a philosophy lesson. Now, here's what he's saying. Only people who serve in the military should be allowed to vote because they are willing to risk their lives for the greater good. And granted, they do risk their lives for the greater good. And granted, that makes sense as to why they should get the vote. But don't other people risk their lives for the greater good in other ways? How about a middle school teacher working in a public middle school? Gun violence in schools aside, dedicating your life to work with 12 and 13-year-olds. I think they should get 2 votes. You know what? The other one I'll say too? Why not this? How about this? How about this? Why not theater majors and actors? They should be able to vote. They are dedicating their lives to this. They are choosing to sleep on a futon with 19 other people in an apartment for a dream. There's some sacrifice there. Army veterans and theater majors. Only they should vote. That would be that right there. We've got something. Kill and cry. Those are the only 2 people who should be able to vote. How do we feel about that? I'm going to get letters now. I know I'm going to get letters. I don't mean to insult the people in the military. I guess by putting them on the same level as theater majors. Perhaps that is an insult, now that I think about it. Moving forward. Rico makes his decision after discovering that his classmate, Carmen Ibanez, also intends to enlist. So he's doing it for the ladies. Does it for a lady, of course. We've all been there, fellas. We've all been there. We've all enlisted in the military to fight extraterrestrial arachnids because of a lady. Rico's choice is taken poorly by his parents, and he leaves with a sense of estrangement. So here's why I think this future society is a utopia. They probably would have preferred that he was a theater major. They would have been praising him on that. Why couldn't you have been a theater major like your father? He is assigned to the mobile infantry and moves to Camp Arthur Currie, named for Arthur Currie, who rose through the ranks to general in World War I, on the Canadian prairie for his training under Sergeant Charles Zim. I want to keep with this theater majors theme, too, by the way, that in this future society, the theater majors should also be able to vote. And for them, they would have to go to Camp Joan Crawford. Okay, the next sentence is my favorite sentence in this Wikipedia summary of Starship Troopers. The training is extremely demanding. And what I like about that sentence is that it describes the next 15 chapters of the book. Training was excruciating. Yes. Yes, yes, all the things that are hard. We got to march, we got to do this, we got to do that. Corporal punishment. Rico receives combat training of all types, including simulated fights in armored suits. Which, by the way, the armored suit stuff was cool. Why didn't they include that in the movie? There's so many other things they cut out of the book that they did in the movie. The armored suits. I wanted to see the armored suits. A fellow recruit is court-martialed, flogged, and dismissed for striking a drill instructor who is also his company commander. This part of the book. It's like a really long episode of Jag, but without the quips. All right, Jean V. Dubois, who taught Rico's history and moral philosophy in school, sends Rico a letter revealing that he is a mobile infantry veteran himself. Which, I'd have to go back and look at that because the character was missing an arm, and Rico couldn't figure out that he was mobile infantry. I wonder how he thought he lost the arm. Theater major, that's how. That was a rough rehearsal of Blythe Spirit that day. The letter helps Rico stay motivated enough not to resign. It's not often you get a pro-fascist cheerleader in your camp. But that really, when you get that kind of love, you can do anything. You can oppress anyone. Now, here's the thing about this futuristic military state. The one thing that it hinges on is that the people who have this power are not being corrupted. So really, what we're saying here is that absolute power in this particular case does not corrupt. And I think it's for that reason that I think now this book should technically be classified as fantasy. All the other stuff science fiction is supposed to be speculative. This absolute power not corrupting, really? That's what that's what you think is going to happen? I doubt it. I'm considering this fantasy from here on out. Rico himself is given 5 lashes for firing a rocket during a drill with armored suits and simulated nuclear weapons without checking to see that no friendlies were within the blast zone, which in combat would have resulted in the death of a fellow soldier. Which is like, this is the part of the book that I'm just reading court transcripts. That's what a lot of this book feels like. It's even in the action sequences. I'm not reading action. I'm reading the witness at the trial describing the action. It would be like if they did this Rise of Skywalker, but instead of showing the big lightsaber fight at the end, we're in a court and one of the witnesses is just saying, yeah, so, then, he knocked her down and then he heard all the voices from all the different Jedi saying, you can do it, the Force is with you. None of them said anything new to her, by the way, other than the Force is with you. I mean, they could have at least said something more specific, like, hey, if you use both lightsabers, you can deflect the lightning. Something practical. And then she got up and she used both lightsabers and she melted him away. And he vaporized him. So he's now definitely dead until he comes back, until the franchise suffers fatigue again, and they got to bring him back. Another recruit who murdered a baby girl after deserting the army is hanged by his battalion after his arrest by civilian police. So the point here was that they're saying, because he was in the army even for a few weeks, the army took responsibility and handled it. Again, it's this sort of idealized version of what the army should be. Which is great, again, if it's the idealized version, but in reality, very often the army ends up hanging people because they looked at me wrong. All right, so the bug war has changed from border incidents to a full-scale war during Rico's training. Okay, finally, we're going to get to some action here. The war, bug war, yes. Bad guys, by the way, in these sci-fi adventures, always bugs. Always bugs. Bugs or bug-like. Has there been a situation yet where the bad guys were panda bears? Just an army of panda bears? You should be afraid of them, sir. They don't need sex. An arachnid attack that annihilates the city of Buenos Aires alerts civilians to the situation. Rico's mother is killed in the attack. So, I read that Heinlein, one of the reasons that he wrote this book was he was responding to those people in the 40s and 50s who wanted to disarm our nukes. And this was his response, saying, hey guys, if the other side has nukes, we got to have nukes too. Wake up. Welcome to the real world. And it's a very, I don't even know if I don't profess to have the answer to this. But I will say it's very easy it's easy for me to have opinions about it because I'm hiding behind a giant nuclear arsenal right now, aren't I? So even though I may not necessarily agree, he does raise a point here. Sadly. Which was another one of the, this was another thing that he was philosophizing in the book, was that he gets into the philosophy of how to fight a war properly, which is the goal is not to kill everybody. The goal is to get the other side to do what you want them to do with the least amount of casualties possible. And so he's trying to have some kind of moral or some kind of morality involved with fighting wars, which is, I don't know, is that nice? I think it's good. I think, right? Kind of. I still think no war at all is better. I think instead of war, I can speak from personal experience, more sex would probably be better. More sex would be better. When I finally had sex, the day after I had sex, you know what I noticed? I wasn't bothered by anything. So maybe that's, but that's a different novel. That's Starship Prostitutes. Whole different book. Perhaps I should write that. That's a whole different arsenal right there. We're going to fly to your planet and we're going to help you out. That's what they do. They go to planets and they help. They relieve tension. That's what they do. Starship Prostitutes. Okay. Rico's ship, the Valley Forge, is destroyed, and his unit is decimated. He is reassigned to the Roughnecks on board the Roger Young, led by Lieutenant Razchak and Sergeant Jalal. Again, the ship is named after the guy who died. I'd rather be on the USS Maya Angelou. That's the ship I want to be on. Yeah. The ship with the soul of a poet who lived a long time. Let's do that one. The unit carries out several raids, and Rico is promoted to corporal by Jalal after Razchak dies in combat. Oh, I love these names. They're not Dune-level names, but they're names. Remember Thufir? One of the comrades in the Roughnecks suggests that Rico go to officer training school and try to become an officer. And this is the point where I'm like, oh God, don't tell me. Are we going to get another 5 chapters? He's going to go back to school. Are we going to get another 5 chapters of training? We're not going to get another 5 chapters of training. He's done training. More armored suits. Rico ends up going to see Jalal and finds that Jalal already had the paperwork ready. Fantastic plot twists, everybody. You're keeping me on the edge of my seat. Rico enters officer candidate school for a second course of training, including further courses in history and moral philosophy. Oh man, this roller coaster ride of a book is happening. And I found it was another 5 chapters, by the way, about how I'm not good enough as a human being. That's how I came away with it. I'm not doing enough for my country. That's what I got from the book. That's what I got from those 5 chapters. They should make this reading for synagogues. This is going to help with the Jewish guilt. We should get the Jews on board with this. If you're a Jewish mother, you got a child, and he's not feeling guilty enough, give him Starship Troopers. This will turn him right around. En route from the Roughnecks to the school, Rico encounters his father, who is also enlisted and is now a corporal, and the two reconcile. See, there's nothing more touching when 2 men who have a shared passion of a military-industrial complex finally come together. It's just so beautiful. It really is. It's as heartwarming as a radiation leak. That's how much my temperature is going up with this. He is also visited in school by Carmen, now an ensign and ship's pilot officer in the Navy, and the two discuss their friend Carl, who had been killed earlier in the war. And if you can't remember, Carl, he was the one in that early chapter who wasn't that developed, who we really never learned about anyway. So it was a very sad loss for people who were not reading the book, but people reading the book, well, Carl, Carl, what can I say? Carl. And in fact, he has that kind of name that's like, no, Carl, I know. I told him, don't open the mine, but he didn't listen. All right, next one's a long one. Here we go. Under the tutelage of his company commander, Captain Blackstone, and with the aid of his platoon sergeant, his boot camp drill instructor, Fleet Sergeant Zim, who was reassigned from Mobile Infantry Boot Camp, Camp Curry, Rico commands a platoon during Operation Royalty, a raid to capture members of the Arachnid Braincast and Queens. Long story short, he was put in charge of a mission to go steal a bug queen. And we finally get to this part of the book, climax of the book, and 90% of it is him checking on everyone's positions. Tim, you there? I'm here. All right, the bugs are over there. Tim, go over there. Got it. Ron, where are you? I'm right behind you. Okay. The bugs are now 3/4 of a mile southeast. I need you to go to quadrant 2. Got it. Tim, yo. He's where I need you to be? Yep. All right. Sandra, yes? Sandra, how far away are you from Tim? Which Tim? The smelly one. Hey, I heard that. This is an open comm channel. Well, better to hear it from me now. You need to wash up better. You need to put in more effort. Okay? Sandra, how far away from that Tim? Well, judging by the smell, about 15 minutes. All right, guys, that's not funny. There's no atmosphere here, okay? I know you're making a joke at I know, I get it. All right, I get it. It's been a hard year, all right? Things have happened. I haven't been as on the hygiene as I should. I'm sorry, okay? I get it. So after all that, Rico then returns to the officer school to graduate. And the novel ends with him holding the rank of second lieutenant in command of his old platoon in the Roger Young, with his father as platoon sergeant. Okay. All right. So at the end, the big climax, fighting with the bug? No. It's getting a diploma. And he said, now you're ready to have adventures. Those adventures will take place after the last page of this novel. The platoon has been renamed Rico's Roughnecks and is about to participate in an attack on Clendathu. So he's flying over there with his father, who's now under his command. And I wonder, could this have been wish fulfillment? I wonder. I think there's a part of us that all wants our dads to work for us at some point. That feels right. The torch has been passed. And all the crap you did to me, I can now do to you. You're hard on me, I'm hard on you. I don't know. Maybe this is how we can get parents and children closer together. Put the children in charge of an army. And the parents can join under the child. And we can just see who's more mature than who, all right? So what's the point of all this? Where am I trying to go with this? What is the message? I think more than people in the military should be allowed to vote. Theater majors should be allowed to vote. As I said, middle school teachers should be allowed to vote. I also think mothers should be allowed to vote. How about that? It's the sons who are going over there. Ooh, this is getting serious. Specifically Jewish mothers. I think they should be allowed to vote. Maybe their vote should count twice. That might be helpful. The only damage there is that Jewish mothers, they can use guilt to get more people to sign up to vote. Because they can say, well, you're an adult. You do what you need to do. It's up to you. I mean, if it were me, I'd tell you what I'd do. But, well, I'm not telling you how to live anymore. All right, so that's the summary. Now, we come to the movie. From what I understand, there was a script going around that was unrelated to the book that was soldiers fighting bugs. And then someone, I don't know if it was the director, I don't know if it was the producer, said, hey, this is really close to that book, Starship Troopers. So let's just do that. We'll call it Starship Troopers. So that happened. Now, the director of the movie, Paul Verhoeven, staunch pacifist, didn't even finish reading the book, and decided, and I'm loosely paraphrasing Michael Ironside who explained this. He said, I'm going to make this movie as fascist as possible, to the point of absurdity, to turn people off against fascism. So the movie, essentially, is a giant flip of the bird to the novel. It is almost a parody of the novel. And that is what I find hysterical about the whole thing. And when I went in and I saw the movie, I came out of it and my friends and I were like, this is stupid. The things that these people are doing are stupid. And the director, I didn't know this all these years later, that's what the director wanted me to feel. Yes, look how stupid these people are. The bugs were supposed to represent communism, by the way. I will throw that out there. At least in Heinlein's vision. So what am I left with? What's the point of this? What have we learned? What can you go out and say to people? How can this help you with your life? What are the lessons? Number one, if you're going to do a movie with army people in the future, mobile suits. That's it. First and foremost, mobile suits. Number two, with respect, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Heinlein. Not just people in the military should be allowed to vote. I think, should everyone be allowed to vote? That's a toss-up. Actually, maybe yes. I think even some criminals should be allowed to vote. Actually, my view on it is that only successful criminals should be allowed to vote because they probably have a better understanding of the economy than anyone else. Because they're on the inside. Bernie Madoff might have better ideas about what to do with the economy than anyone else. He's been through it. He knows the loopholes. He knows the tricks. I don't know. I think that's good. I think I hit a lot of points here. Talked a lot about a lot of sci-fi stuff. We had a lot of good points. I think this is good. I think I should have an outro music of some kind. Ba, ba. Boots were made for walking. Bum, bum.